And welcome back to another edition of the Coach's Perspective here on Riverside TV. Well, last week we had week 0, and it was a barn burner, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Jeff Gorham, and he is Ghazal Hassan, my partner in crime. Let's go over week 0. Ghazal Hassan, how you doing today, buddy?
I'm doing wonderfully. What a great week of action around the city of Riverside in week 0. I know you don't like week 0, Jeff, but that first week of action, a bunch of Riverside teams in action, and we had a couple of surprises, Jeff.
Yes, we did. Let's start off. First of all, let's start off with our game, the Arlington Lions, who christened their brand new stadium at the high school. First home game that they had in 49 years of action. What a great place to have a ball game. And what a great game. Just came up a little bit short for Arlington as they battle Lakeside to a narrow defeat. What did you think of that game? What were the takeaways you came from that?
You know, it was tough. Lakeside, you know they were going to be disciplined. You and I talked before the game. Lakeside with a little more experience. Remember, they had 20 starters coming back out of their 22. But from what we saw, Arlington, I think, is on a good trajectory. You know, Coach Argamosa was focused on, hey, we had the big run last year, but the goal this year, hey, let's finish over 500. Let's make the playoffs. I think based on what we saw on Friday, it's both are still on the table. Little bit of sloppiness they need to clean up a little bit. And I love my takeaway was they had 3 or 4 really young sophomores playing, and they all played extremely well. Quarterback played well. Akili Thomas, one of the linebackers, played really well. They had a couple of younger guys who are going to step up and join. I think they have 13 returnees. So now they're at about 17, 18 strong. In terms of their personnel, I think Arlington's got a bright future this year, Jeff.
Yeah, in fact, they had Akili Thomas was playing linebacker. He was returning kicks, ran back a great one, probably would have been the game changer, but it got called back. But I'll tell you what, you and I talked. Kevin Argamosa has done a great job. He's got a good staff, and the buy-in is definitely evident watching that young Lions team play.
Got the Covington factor on his staff. The young guy, you know, a bunch of young guys. Jacob Rogers showed out pretty well. And how about T-Bone, Bijan Turner? You know, he's an older guy. He's not a young guy, but he's kind of the pulse of that team. He had a couple of nice plays, both on offense and on defense.
The mustard-covered steak. T-Bone, the new. Remember that name. He's going to be fun to talk about here on Riverside TV this upcoming season. Let's transition over to possibly the city championship, where my Ramona Rams took on the John W. North Huskies at 3rd and Chicago. But the game was at Riverside. It was actually at Ramona, and Ramona took away a big victory versus a very good North team.
They did a really good job. I think we saw this last year too, and it's not their fault. North was ahead in so many games. They weren't very good at playing from behind. And they did come back, I think, on 2 different occasions. They cut the lead to 3 and 2 points. But Ramona, you know, with Bo Bruins and Nathan Johnson, they were able to finish off the Huskies this year. And remember, Ramona played last year. That was their MO, right, Jeff? They would jump out in front of you, and then in the second half, they just kind of pin their ears back on defense and let you kind of come at them a little bit. And I think Coach Mush has got it humming over there. The showdown we're looking at, obviously, is the rematch from last year with Norte Vista. Novi was their only loss last year before heading into the playoffs.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, Ramona, I've heard it from a lot of guys. In fact, I talked to Ken Batdorf today. He said Ramona is the real deal. Ramona has a tough game this week as they go over to Kaiser High School, play Billy Cardosi. I'll tell you, that will be a very good benchmark to see how good this Riverside Ramona team really is.
You know, Mush is a smart guy, and he's going to test his team. He's going to try to expose his team. Hey, let's go play these tough teams and see where do we need to improve? What are some areas we might be exposed? And I'm guaranteeing you, he scheduled that Kaiser game to prepare for Norte Vista. You know that was the strategy.
Of course. You know, in fact, Kaiser and Novi scrimmaged just a couple of weeks ago. Same kind of offense. They run that smash mouth football. But I'll tell you what, the one thing I do think that Ramona has that a lot of teams don't have is a very good, not great, a very good high school quarterback that can pass the ball all over the place. And I think that could be the difference in the game versus Kaiser.
Yeah, well, we don't know what his ceiling is. We know he's pretty solid. He did a great job last year, 9-1, playoff team. But this is his second year now, second year as a starter. The game's going to start to slow down for him. So it's week 0 right now, but by week 7 or 8, maybe he will be a great high school quarterback, Jeff Gorham.
Yeah, I sure hope so. In fact, he's a great kid. Coach's son, you got to love him. I'm always rooting for the Rams. Let's talk a little bit about the River Valley juggernaut of Norte Vista. Norte Vista goes down to defeat in their first game up at Hesperia. What'd you take away from that one?
I'm going to tell. I didn't get to see the game, so I can't really say very much. But I will say this: Ken Batdorf spent a little time with me in the booth, and if he ever gets sick of coaching, I think he'd slide right into the broadcast booth. He could be like a John Madden-esque type of analyst, And it was interesting because I was throwing him steaks, and he was consuming them. Like he was on top of the game. You can tell he was really watching that game closely, scouting Arlington.
Yeah, and scouting, and also it's really nice to see a coach come out, not just to scout, but to be friends. I mean, he really likes Coach Argamosa, loves Rick Covington, that's former assistant coach, and it's always nice to see a coach show that camaraderie by showing his love for the Arlington Lions.
Well, he told a great story on the air. He said, well, hey, we opened Zach Erb Stadium. You remember they opened Zach Erb Stadium. They said, I had to come. I had to come open the new stadium. I had to see it for myself, before playing here. So, yeah, that's the camaraderie around the city of Riverside. They got their stadium 22 years ago, and he was happy to see the Arlington Lions get their stadium open.
Well, let's talk about another couple teams before we get to this week's matchup. Hillcrest last week took care of Riverside Poly, so two Riverside teams battling out, and another close game, but Hillcrest comes away with a victory.
Little bit of a transition last year for Travis Carter and his team. They brought in a new defense. They had some personnel, back and forth in terms of injuries and guys not playing. But, that he had them ready a couple years ago. They did a fantastic job in that, the spring season. You could see the potential in Hillcrest, and I think now they're ready to get it going this year, Jeff.
Yeah, I really firmly believe it's going to be a two-team race in the River Valley. I think it's going to be between Ramona and Hillcrest. No offense to everyone else, but those two teams I think are right now cream of the crop in the River Valley League.
I mean, the great thing about that, Jeff, is you get to do it on the field. Everybody gets to play everybody. So if you think that, maybe Hillcrest is a little bit overhyped, you can go try to prove it on the field. And we had that crazy year. Was it 3 or 4 years ago, Jeff, where there was a 5-way tie in the River Valley League? Don't be surprised if there's somewhat of a jumble, because I think those teams are going to beat each other up all season.
I agree. In fact, the best part about that 5-way tie is La Sierra goes, hey, we got second place. It was the highest they finished in years. So let's transition over to our game. You and I will be on the call on Friday night as Martin Luther King is going to battle a pretty darn young but up-and-coming Redlands Terriers team. What do you think about that game?
It's very intriguing for me. As a kid, I kind of started covering high school football in Orange County, like in the mid to late 90s. And I remember that the inland teams back then, you're talking about Eisenhower.
Yes.
You're talking about Fontana, and you talked about Redlands. I think Riverside Poly had won in the 80s, but by the 90s, they were kind of battling north and they were kind of shuffling around. But those were the three teams you remember. Eisenhower, I think, won a couple of CIFs in the 90s. Redlands was always there. Fontana, they had that success in the late 80s, but they were still a force in the Inland Empire. And so, Jim Walker's no longer there. Bob Stangl Jr. is in there, and he's got a great history in the city of Riverside. It's the thin blue line, the blue line of the Redlands Terriers against kind of a new school, right? King didn't open until the late 90s. I don't think it opened until 1999. And our friend Jason McMains is the head man over there right now. Again, they took some lumps last year, but I felt in that first game against Tommy Leach's Roosevelt team, those guys are a pretty good squad. They held their own. They lost 26-20, but they held their own against a pretty solid team that'll probably make the playoffs out of that new Big West Conference.
Yeah, and think about it. They have not only Tommy Leach, they have Ron Geringer as the offensive coordinator over there, the former head coach over at Corona High School. So a very big surprise. I was disappointed to see that King lost, but I'll tell you what, when we talk to Coach Maines, I bet he's got to be feeling pretty good about where his team is game 1 of this season.
Yeah, it's a process, and Redlands, I think, will be a good test for them. As you mentioned, Redlands is a little bit young. They're going through a bit of a transition, but, you're still going to have to produce on the field to put them. They play in a very tough league in the Citrus Belt League, so they're used to kind of running that gauntlet where they're playing a bunch of tough teams.
Yeah. In fact, I believe Redlands had 4 starters on the varsity last year that were true freshmen. So this could be an interesting game. A lot of growth between freshman and sophomore years, and we've seen it before. We've seen a lot of good players have breakout years their sophomore year.
I'm interested to see what Coach McMains can do now that he's had kind of a full offseason program. Remember, it was a bit of a jumble last year. He got the job kind of late last year, and there were all the COVID restrictions. And remember, we did a couple of their games early. I think it was that Poly game. They've been devastated by COVID,
Yes.
by the protocols and whatnot, not having guys be able to practice. So I believe that's reversed the trend this year. And, Jason always did a great job wherever he was. Remember, he was the offense coordinator at Notre Dame when they had that nice run a couple years ago, and then took over Citrus Hill. But be interested to see what Coach McMahon, and of course his run at Rubidoux at the Doe.
Yes.
So
right.
he not his first rodeo. So I'm looking forward to seeing what Coach McMahon puts on the field on Friday night.
Well, Gazal, we will be on the call for Friday night's game as King, like we said, is going to battle Redlands High School, the Terriers, and we will have the call at 7 p.m. on Riverside TV. And we are back here on the Coach's Perspective on Riverside TV, and I'm now joined by the head football coach of Martin Luther King High School. He is the great Jason McMains. How you doing, Coach?
I'm doing great, Coach. How you been, man?
Oh, it's been a great off season, but all I've been thinking about was football. And I'll tell you what, I couldn't be happier, and I can't wait to see the Wolves in action on Friday night versus Redlands, the Terriers. You guys are playing a bunch of dogs.
We are playing some dogs, and we definitely are excited for the challenge, man, for sure.
Okay, who would win, a Terrier or a wolf? In a straight,
wolf for sure, man.
A wolf will eat a Terrier.
Sure, man.
He'll eat it in like 2 bites. Well, Coach, you guys played last week. You played a familiar opponent that you guys have had in the last few years. You played Roosevelt. Came away with a tough loss, but what do you have to say coming away from that game? You got to be feeling pretty good about yourself.
It's kind of twofolded for us. I mean, we feel good. I really. I loved how our kids competed for 48 minutes, and that's something we definitely, I saw a big improvement, from last year to this year. So that was definitely pleased with that. They played hard. They brought it every single play. There was no quit, but then you watch the film and we had our chances, and that's where I'm kind of losing sleep over this weekend is just the missed opportunities we had on Friday. But hey, it's another week. We're back at it on Monday, and we've turned the page, and we're ready for Redlands on our first home game on our new turf. So it's exciting.
Yeah, you guys, speaking of that turf, Ramona had a new turf, and you guys as well. Does it have a giant wolf head? What is on the center of the field this year?
It does. It is straight King High School. Across the board. It's got great end zones, Martin Luther King Wolves in it, and right in the 50-yard line, it's got our new Wolf logo. And so we're excited. We've been able to get on it since the start of camp, and, it's definitely, it's nice. The kids deserve it. The school deserves it. The community deserves it. So we're ready to kind of put it out on display on Friday.
Now, Coach, you're entering your sophomore year, right, with the Wolves. What has been the big difference now that you've had King for an entire year instead of just a couple months? Because I know you got hired late last year.
Yeah, it was just nice to really kind of slow things down during the off season and focus on what's so important, and that's strength training and building and training our athletes, and developing them. So. It was great. Last year, it seemed so rushed to get everything in because of the short amount of time that we had. But we were able to, from January on, we were able to utilize some time to work on the field and get, offense, defense things taken care of. But I'm just so proud of my kids because, that Monday after the Santiago loss last year, they made a commitment to start right away in the weight room, and we haven't stopped since, And so I'm proud of their hard work. And we're looking forward to a good 22 season.
Now, Coach, you've kind of been able to evolve your offense now this year, your defense. What is the strongest asset you think that the Wolves have coming into this season?
Well, I think our defense, number one, played outstanding on Friday, and we got some very talented kids. We have I think a very stout, very good physical front seven. We have some very good players in the back end, especially our safeties. So we like where we're at defensively. Offensively, we love our skill positions across the board. Losing Noah Harrell, our quarterback, in the scrimmage to an injury, definitely put us back a little bit. But our quarterback now, Keon Gant, he stepped right in, played tremendous against Roosevelt, and we haven't missed a beat since. So definitely, we were kind of after the scrimmage looking, like, hey, what's it going to be like without the starting quarterback, that we had last year? But give Keon a bunch of credit for how he handled it and how he was able to come in and step up and lead our team.
Now, Coach, you've always been innovative offensively. I've always enjoyed watching your teams. There's always something, a different wrinkle, a trick play. Are we going to see the same Jason McMain's offense where it's going to be, it's just going to change it up quite a bit throughout the game?
We have some wrinkles here and there. I always, I love our offense. I mean, Steve Johnstone, our offensive coordinator, does a great job, and me and him have been working together since our days back at Notre Dame, and so we got a good working relationship there. He does a tremendous job, and so, but yeah, we got some things, ready to go. We definitely want to utilize a lot of formations, and try to kind of outnumber as much as we can at the point of attack. Sometimes it looks good, sometimes not so good, but that's just the way it is.
Now, Coach, you guys play, I think you have 3 home games out of your first 5 preseason games. A very daunting schedule, though. What are you hoping to get out of the preseason as you go into, what is it, the Big West Conference? It's whatever.
The Big West. I think in one of my interviews with Pep, I called it the Great West. I wasn't sure, what it was called, but it is the Big West. So I want to correct that mistake. But yeah, it's the Big West. It's the lower division. It's still, in my mind, a very competitive, great league that we're in. We got some quality, great teams that have very rich, high school football traditions. Coaches that do tremendous jobs. So, we're definitely looking forward to the competition and the challenge ahead, But yeah, I mean, our preseason, we opened up with Roosevelt. Obviously them being a semifinalist team last year, we started off good, and then obviously we got a tough Redlands team. Coach Stengel will have those guys and his new staff ready to go. Paloma Valley, much improved. Poly is, it's our rivalry game, so that's going to be a tough game, no matter, what the records are or what's going on, so Coach Rice does a tremendous job there. And then we end preseason with Murrieta Valley. So, we're fortunate to play, in that conference, and we get a chance to play 7 great Big West Conference games, the 5 in our league, and then the 2 crossover games with Roosevelt and Murrieta Valley.
Well, it's a great way to get ready for the season, playing some powerhouses. Let's focus our attention a little bit to the Redlands Terriers. Young team, Coach Stengel, like you said, has a deep Riverside roots. I believe you started 4 freshmen on the varsity last year. What have you seen, or have you scouted them at all, and what can we expect from Redlands?
Yeah, I mean, they're well coached. They got a great coaching staff, very experienced coaching staff. Some that I know very, very well. And so, they're going to come in and they're going to be very physical, and they're going to know their assignments, and they're going to play hard. It's going to be a very, very tough challenge for us at home. And so we're excited to take on that challenge and see, how well and how much we can progress from week 1 to week 2. My old former coach, Coach Cochran, who I absolutely love, he'd always tell me, as a player and when he was on the staff with us, teams make their biggest improvement from game 1 to game 2. So that's our challenge this week, and that's what we're definitely working hard towards.
Well, Coach, I know for a fact we're going to have that Riverside Poly game on Riverside TV as well, but we will be with you guys on your debut on Riverside TV this season, Friday night, 7 p.m. versus the Redlands Terriers. Ghazal Hassan and myself will have the call. And, Coach, good luck to you, and looking forward to covering you the rest of the season here on Riverside TV.
I love it, Coach. It's great to talk to you always, man, and look forward to seeing you guys out there Friday night.
Well, he's Jason McMains. I'm Jeff Gorham. This has been the Coach's Perspective. And welcome back to the Coach's Perspective here on Riverside TV. And I'm now joined by my best friend in the entire world, my little buddy. There he is, Pep Fernandez. How you doing, Pep?
I'm doing fantastic, man. What a week 0. And I had the honor of listening to you and Ghazal Hassan. You guys have been on Riverside TV for forever. And you guys had some great games in that first week, some great Riverside battles that went – actually, both of the games that you guys did went down to the wire.
I'll tell you what, it was the Riverside, they're calling it the Riverside City Championship. I don't know if we can call it that after week 0, but it was a great one between Ramona and North. What did you think of that battle?
Listen, I knew Ramona was going to be tough, like just based on all the guys they had back, and JW North, they had such a great senior class last year. They're still good. Don't get me wrong. North is still good, but I just feel like this is a special Ramona team that, once in a while, like maybe every 10 years or 20 years or so, there's a special team that comes through the program. I think this might be Ramona's special team this season. So I'm not shocked that they beat North. And they've got another huge game coming up this weekend. Actually, a mutual friend of ours, Billy Cardosi and the Kaiser Cats. That's actually probably one of the biggest games, if not the biggest game in the entire Inland Empire. Ramona playing at Kaiser. That's going to be a true test for the Rams this coming week. Well,
I'll tell you what, our friend Billy Cardosi has had some of the best running backs of the last decade, I should say, coming out of his program at Kaiser. But I want to talk a little bit about the arm of Nate Johnson. Coach is humble at his son. Mashinsky says, my son's a good high school quarterback. I think he's a great high school quarterback. And I think the difference between Ramona and Kaiser is Kaiser's going to have to stop the pass, and he's got some weapons Nate Johnson can throw to almost anybody on that roster.
And that's the beauty of having a passing game, the luxury of having a quarterback like Nate Johnson, because you got that great running back like Bo Bruins for Ramona, but you can't put all your attention on Bo Bruins, because if you do, you've got a great quarterback named Nate Johnson. He's going to make you pay in the passing game. So that's the luxury that Ramona has. Does Kaiser have 2 great running backs, 2 of the best in the IE? Yeah, they do. And that's what Ramona's going to have to do, is stop that run game. If they stop the run game of Kaiser, they're going to make Kaiser have to go to the passing game, which we'll see if they can effectively do that. But we know for sure Ramona can throw and they can run the football. They proved it last week against JW North.
Yeah, don't kick to Bo Bruins. He can return kicks, ladies and gentlemen. Just kick it out of wherever he is. Don't kick it there.
No, he's that good, right? He's one of those guys who just find a way to put the football in his hands. Throw it to him, hand it off to him, let him return kicks. Just get the ball in his hands, and he's going to go make plays.
Yes, sir. Hey, we did, however, get to open the christened new stadium at Arlington High School. Very tough loss for the Lions, but I'll tell you what, they seemed like they're more improved than they were last year. Coach Argamosa has a complete buy-in from his team, and I'll tell you what, they're in the right direction. Even though they are the defending CIF champs, I think they're better than they were last year.
Well, Jeff, I had the honor of going to the Arlington Hall of Fame ceremony on Saturday, and as I told some folks, listen, remember last year, the Arlington football team got off to a more than slow start. Remember, they were 0-7. So one loss against Lakeside is not going to ruin your season. In fact, Coach Argamosa probably has everybody else right where he wants them, thinking, Arlington, they're going to, stumble through the, first half of the season. They're going to explode and make the playoffs and make another CIF championship run. So, I wouldn't, obviously you want to win on that first game in the new stadium and all the pomp and circumstance. You want to get that victory. But in the big scheme of things, the big picture, yeah, it's not going to be, I don't think, reflective of what they're going to do for the rest of the year. I think they've got a good squad, and I think they're going to turn things around. And again, look what they did last year. This is a team that does not give up.
Yeah, very disciplined team. And really, like I said, they're all in on Coach Argamosa. Let's move over to a game between two city teams, Hillcrest and Poly last week. Hillcrest getting the better of Poly. Was that a big surprise to you at all?
Yeah, you know what? I know you feel the same way as I do. We think the world of both those head coaches, Travis Carter and John Rice. And, Hillcrest, they kind of took a step back last year. We were wondering, could the Trojans, kind of get back on, going in the right direction, trending in the right direction. And this is a Poly team that made the playoffs, won a playoff game last year. So for Hillcrest to beat Poly, I think it was 24-14. I think they won by 10. That was a solid win for Hillcrest. And now, this week, they got an Orange Vista team, and Jeff, Coach Greg Zomalt as well. They're very good. This is a very athletic and fast Orange Vista team, so that was a nice win for Hillcrest against Poly. But now it's going to be even tougher on Thursday night when they go up against a very talented and well-coached Orange Vista team.
Now, is it true? Is there a great, true freshman quarterback playing for Orange Vista?
Yeah, that's super true. His name escapes me. It's like Khalil Abdul Aziz, yes. I want to say. 14 years old, made his varsity debut for Orange Vista and threw for over 300 yards, 4 touchdowns. So a athlete, great quarterback that Orange Vista has. So that'll be definitely one of those things for head coach Travis Carter and the Hillcrest Trojans. If you're going to beat Orange Vista, you're going to have to find a way to maybe, get to the quarterback, maybe confuse him a little bit in just his second varsity start.
Hey, at 14, my son couldn't even tie his shoes, for God's sakes.
I'm thinking the same thing. I'm like 14 years old, man. I'm still playing with like G.I. Joes and Hot Wheels, and this kid's out there probably getting scholarship offers already.
Yeah, what a great story. But let's go over to our game of the week, which is going to be Martin Luther King versus your hometown, the Redlands Terriers. Tell us, what are your initial thoughts on that game?
I'll say this. So last week, King and played Roosevelt, right? And played him close. And Roosevelt, traditionally, last couple of years, they've been good, Jeff. One of the top teams in the Inland Empire. So for King, I know there's not, no such thing as a good loss, but to only lose by a touchdown to Roosevelt, that was a pretty good showing for the King Wolves. Now, this is a Redlands team that took its lumps last season, but they had a ton of guys, a ton of freshmen and sophomore playing last year. So they got great experience, even though they're taking a lot of losses last year. They got a lot of great experience. So this Redlands team this year should definitely be much improved. They got a new head coach, Bob Stengel. So this might be a different Redlands team that we saw from last year. But again, based on what King did last week, I still like the Wolves in this one.
Yeah, I agree. I think Coach McMains has done a great job. And a year under his belt, off season, he's great in the weight room. He did it at Notre Dame. He did it at Harupa Valley. He did it at Rubidoux. He did it at Citrus Hill in a short stint. The guy loves the weight room, and those guys will be ready to play come Friday night.
Yeah, and Coach McMains, I'm glad you said that, Jeff. When he came on the Inland Sports Show, he said this was his first true offseason. Remember last year, in his first year as the King head coach, he came over like in July. It was like a month right before they were scrambling to, implement the offense and build the coaching staff and all those things. And then this year, he had a chance to have a whole offseason. And you mentioned the weight room. He's big on the weight room. So a whole offseason of weight room and being with the guys, they're only going to be better for it this coming season.
Well, he's Pep Fernandez. I'm Jeff Gorham. This has been another edition of The Coach's Perspective here on Riverside TV. And we have a game Friday night, King versus Redlands at 7 p.m. on the Riverside TV channel. Good night, Pep.